All right. Well, let's call Committee of the Whole to order, noting that all members of the committee are present, as well as many members of the administration and our full council staff. First, I'll move to approve the minutes of our March 6th meeting.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes. And with that, we'll move into some discussion on specific proposals, sort of as listed here, starting with, I'll just call it Cove Generator. And this is completed initially by Chad Berry at his request. So I don't know if someone in the Human Services Department would be presenting tonight.
I think it was. Yep, okay. I'm here this evening to present this. So I have a PowerPoint here. So you'll see our new beautiful logo we're putting out there. So as you know, when Cove Community Center was built, it was spec'd out for a generator, but that didn't happen probably because of other larger unforeseen needs as well. But it's become an identified need. Chad and I have realized it's become an identified need. At Lothar, there was one, so that the senior center at that point could always be used as like an emergency shelter for warming or cooling centers, as well as just a safe place for residents to go in case of an emergency. And we've had numerous situations this year where our good friends at the housing department have often needed us when boilers went down in an apartment building to temporarily bring people into Cove, give them safe shelter. And as you all know, Cove is a very beautiful facility that is welcoming to all. And so it would be really nice with all of our divisions there consolidated for us to have a generator or some type of full-time power to operate. We also know that we would work with our police and fire department if there's an emergency need, like Superstorm Sandy that came through at one point. That was used, and we had to work with the schools to provide temporary shelter in the Red Cross and all that. And I've done this at our church and stuff like that before. But so we really want to do that. We want to make Cove a place that could be available to the community 24/7, 365 days a year as an emergency shelter, as well as there's other needs. Without a generator, if Cove was to lose power, thank you. If Cove was to lose power, we have a refrigerator that also stores food and supplies that we would lose. And that would be good for our Division of Aging's meal program. And it would be really helpful for us if we had some backup power for that as well. So next slide. So the estimates, there was some, obviously when Cove was built, there was specs brought out to put a generator in. And so Chad and I worked to contact Moody Nolan and Infinity Construction and Osborne Engineering to do that. So it would be a 300 kilowatt to provide 400 A service. Any of you in that world know what I'm talking about? Probably better than I do. But basically, it was a natural gas generator, and it would be an outdoor enclosure. It would be very similar to the ones you see outside City Hall. It would have to sit behind, it'd be the west, kind of the southwest corner of the building is where it's spec'd to go out. And if you go to the next slide, the natural gas, we'd have to run a gas line for around $7,000. A generator and the concrete pad, you can see the pricing would be $255,000. If it's diesel, the total cost would be $175,000. Obviously, other budget, 10% contingency and 5% price. We never know. The market's fluctuating a lot. So there again is the layout with the spec of where it would be going in that corner of the property, which right now is just mulch, basically mulch and some trees. So we're also open to, we'll go to the next one, Marie. Oh, Who's doing it? You're doing it, Sarah? Okay, sorry, Sarah. So we're open to receiving other options of energy that can help us achieve the desired goals. But one of the things is we really do feel like we want to be able to have that option and be able to sustain the building for numerous days. So I don't know if other options hopefully could work towards more than just 1 or 2 days, especially with refrigeration and stuff like that. We obviously know our public works would do everything they could to get Cove up right away, right, Mr. Gordon? But we really want to make sure that we reach the goal of providing a safe and comfortable location for our residents in emergency crisis. And we have to think, we have the family room, so families, that would be a great place. We have all the comforts, we have everything people could need. So we're open to other alternate options, but we also need to think about what is the adequate amount of backup power needed, the space and parking lot and around the building for generator or alternative power supply, and that leads me to a slide I'm going to have us go back to in a minute here, Sarah. Council, is we are at full capacity for parking at Cove as well. So I'm just kind of throwing this in here. Today, just in conversation with this, we have, I think, if you look at it, we have 34 parking spaces, and our side lot has 9 spaces, and we have 24 staff members coming to Cove. And so anything and everything we do, we cannot take away parking space. We're already kind of in a crisis nightmare at Cove at times, especially in our peak hours from like 10:30 to like 12:30, when you also at that time have the congregate meal, you have the family room activities coming and going, as well as 12 drivers, usually a day, coming to pick up the meals for home delivered meals, as well as, taking those meals out and coming back. And so whatever we do, we need to consider our whole parking lot and the lack of parking and potential need for more parking. And whatever we do, we have to consider that we have 3 large buses that are around 25 feet long and have a clearance of at least 10 feet. The van, as well as a service truck, as well as every day we have the food bank truck coming to Cove and having to drop off the meals for our congregate meal program. And that clearance is about a 14-foot clearance we would need. So, and I wouldn't want anything to happen, or we may need to expand our garage as well. So if that generator impedes or other power, I'm laying this all out for all of us. We need a garage because currently we have a very old garage that came with the property that has, we've done our best to kind of repair it as a city in the time being, trying to figure out what we're doing next. But the garage floods and the equipment and storage items are vulnerable to damage. And there's actually, with the equipment that we need for the lawn and the upkeep and all of that, we can't even put anything else in the garage right now. And so, in thinking of all the options we have out there, I just want the council to be fully aware of all the needs at Cove. Obviously, this is a bright spot for our community with us having the human services there, and obviously the council and the city have made a huge commitment. So whatever we decide to do going forward, we need backup energy, potentially expanding our parking and or not making sure we take away any parking. Expanding it would be great, as well as looking at that garage space within it. So I know we're talking about a generator, but in talking about the generator, I really also wanted to put out there limitations and considerations within what we do. So, any other questions you all may have?
Thank you for that presentation. Just quickly, procedurally, I guess unlike our last meeting in a way, just want to make sure we get through all of our presentations this evening. Do want to leave some time for questions with each one, but we're not going to necessarily debate dollars and cents back and forth with each presentation or anything along that line. We'll reserve that for another meeting, I think. But just want to make sure we get through all the presentations. With that, a few minutes for any questions my colleagues may have. And I do want to defer in every case to the council member sponsoring each individual presentation. And in this case, that's Vice President Keppel.
Thank you, President Litton, and thank you, Assistant Director J.C., for the presentation. So one of the reasons that when Human Services brought this forward to me that I sponsored, it was The obvious need to, we had several storms and situations in the past year where residents were asking about warming shelters or cooling shelters, and I think that's an important thing for us as a city to be able to provide to our residents. Since then, Councilman Rader and I had a lot of conversations about alternative energy solutions to this problem. So, as Assistant Director Dacey pointed out, there's a lot of considerations here. We're very limited and tight on space, and there's a lot of uses for it, for that limited space. But I think what we're going to be getting into, what I would consider the sort of part 2 of the presentation here, as we go into Councilman Rader's help on looking at more green energy solutions to this problem. So we'll be looking at all of that. But in terms of the priority of finding a way to keep Cove available to our residents in times of crisis, I think that is a top priority for me, and that's why I sponsored this particular proposal, and as well as the one with Councilman Rader. So I see this is option 1, and the solar powered energy solution is option 2. So yes.
No, I was just merely going to comment that in this unique instance, perhaps we move right into that secondary presentation, just so that we kind of can compare the two together and not, fully debate one and then fully debate the other.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. Chair and Administration. Assistant Director Jaisley, thanks for being here and the proposal. A couple thoughts. One is, I'm glad we're talking about a range of needs for human services in Cove. I think everyone agrees that that's a dynamic and wonderful and well-staffed and well-used center, and so it's good to hear your needs. I hope that we'll start in the ARPA discussion, but continue through the end of the budget year. So whether or not City Council makes a determination for use of this immediate tranche of funds through ARPA right away, for sure, in my mind, we need to address, most or all of the needs that you're articulating here. We could also be doing that in our main budgetary process, which traditionally will begin informally late summer and formally in November, December. So we could get a start on some things and continue. So the pool of funds, in my mind, should not be restricted only to ARPA. So whatever the outcome of our discussion is, my request would be that we work together with the administration to get a plan to address these needs. And some things like patching the garage, I think, don't we have in-house capacity in Public Works with some of our in-house shop capacity? And if not, we can think through a different solution. But I know we've done that before. Thanks.
Thank you with that. Go ahead.
So, good evening, everyone. Just a few things to consider with the generator. On my behalf as the Public Works Director, I would encourage, if you do entertain the idea of a generator, for it to be natural gas. I know there's a larger cost with that, but we certainly don't want to be concerned with who's going to be filling the generator with diesel fuel continuously. With natural gas, there certainly would not be a worry there. And the second thing I wanted everybody to take into consideration was to make sure that the generator is large enough to keep the entire building running. We certainly don't want to pick and choose what we're running and not running, especially during an emergency with heat or cooling. So just some considerations that I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of.
And with that, thank you for clarifying that. So the generator plus concrete pad shown there under the natural gas line, is that something that would power the entirety of the building?
You go ahead. Do you know? I mean, from what I understood, it may not be 100% the whole building. There's different levels of power of generator, and I think,
So no. is what
correct me if I'm
hearing.
wrong, I can get more information for you specifically on
Okay.
that, but I believe it would have to be even larger,
Okay.
potentially.
Just so we can fully understand what recommendation we're being given, and what sort of best-case scenario is, and then, subsequent to that, what other things.
I'm
we
going
might
to
consider.
double check an email right now and try to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Council President. I know Director Barry did a great deal of research on this topic ahead of time, and unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight, so we can gather that.
All right, then with that, who's running point on a solar presentation for the same?
That'll be B. I'm going to expectation set right here. I don't have a slide deck available. In fact, we're still in the process of collecting estimates. Just started working with the administration on that, getting some of these really important kind of line items set so that we can keep moving forward. I do have some information, but I would choose to kind of wait till I have everything before I share it here with all of us. And to that point, I would like to know a little bit better from council leadership what they anticipate the process being for moving these forward. If this is going to be the last opportunity, I think others may want another opportunity to share presentations, but if you could share a little bit more about what you feel the next steps will be.
I suppose that's not fully fleshed out necessarily, but I would personally like to work with as much information as possible. And if we are truly being asked to consider a solar option, I would like to truly know what that would cost, along with what the full cost of a generator that would power the entire building.
Sure.
Given the first presentation. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to that, I definitely want to make sure we have better information than I'm currently in possession of. I think that's as far as I want to talk about.
And I'll only add that some of this is a bit of a game, and I don't mean game to be flippant at all. I simply mean that, there will be a multitude of projects here presented to us over this meeting and perhaps others that, could tug at heartstrings and pull us in all kinds of different directions. And I just want to be cognizant of that possibility as well.
Thank you. And so my goal is going to be over the next 2 weeks, if you could give me 2 weeks, I could come up with some really good options that we can have before us, and we can really compare nuts and bolts. And I think we heard here tonight, making sure we know exactly what the needs are to meet the full needs of the Cove Center, so that whatever we size is going to be, appropriate for what the center needs, both in terms of a generator and battery backup. Totally hear the need to preserve as much space outside as possible. Fortunately, solar arrays that would be outside, whether to be on the roof or would be in the parking lot in a way that would not obstruct any current parking, and certainly could be designed if they were featured. It sounds like there may be some future plans for expanding parking. That's exciting. But if there are, we can certainly build those into whatever that solar array is going to look like if it were to be outside. And so I like that idea of having several options that we can all talk about, discuss, look at the numbers, and come to a decision together on what might be best for. And it could be a mix, by the way. We could do a battery backup with solar. We could do solar and a generator. We could just do purely a battery backup, no solar. There's multiple options here. So, and I think that's exciting. I think the fact that we have options and we can choose as a council with the administration on what's going to work best for everybody here in a public fashion is pretty neat. So that's all I got for you, Mr. Chair. And hopefully we can come back here in 2 weeks when I'm better prepared. I appreciate it.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair.
Just quickly, I just want to note, since we don't, I'd like to keep comments brief since we don't have a budget for this particular project before us or anything along that line necessarily, just so that we can, in the interest of time, move on to other presentations.
Thank you, Mr.
Bullock.
Chair. I can be very brief. In my view, we should be considering battery backup, electric battery, which should be price competitive, and not natural gas, which leaves the city exposed to higher commodity prices like we experienced last year, and also has climate emissions. And we're about to consider and implement a climate action plan. So right now, we don't assign a dollar cost in the equation for the systems that we size. We really should. And if we don't do that, we should at least adhere to our climate sustainability goals. Frankly, I would like to see the city convert all of our backup over time to electric battery, and the cost should be the same or a cost savings. Today, the good news, everybody, is solar is the cheapest on the market, or it's either price competitive with conventional energy or it's the cheapest on the market. So if we were talking 10 or 15 years ago, that would not be the case, and we might have a different, situation. But today more and more companies, even including power grids, they'll have big batteries at their transformer stations to serve the grid for conventional means. People have the Tesla wall for their home. There's a commercial version that, I'm looking at the same rating. So, but maybe I started backwards. For sure, we should be taking care of the needs of the Cove Center for functioning, and we should get that done. Would like to make the invitation to the city that this is our first step where we're really going to commit through our actions to live up to the Climate Action Plan and all the sustainability goals we've been talking about for years, and show some leadership in the region. And it shouldn't be that difficult these days, because that's kind of the next wave of technology is energy storage. So I think it will be a win-win, as a matter of fact. And it should be space compact, actually, to have, relatively modest-sized bank of batteries. I'd be happy to work with the administration on this. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Keppel.
Thank you. I just, on the question of process, I just wanted to bring us back to the tentative schedule that was sent out to all council members. So we do have next Monday's meeting, we have external presenters coming in. And then the following week, we have reserved for other committees that are not CAL. So, or Committee of the Whole for the, so we have that reserved for other committee meetings, and then April 24th, we had reserved for continuing ARPA discussion. So that would be a good time for us to, is that a fair timeline? Yeah. Okay, great. So that would be a good time for us to continue.
Appreciate that point of clarification, Vice President. With that, I'd like to move to our Planning Department, a proposal through the Planning Department by Director Leininger, presented by Mr. David Boss.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for the Madison Park Master Plan implementation. As many of you may be aware, we were awarded money through the County Planning Commission to conduct a master plan for Madison Park. This money, this request is for $100,000 specific to implement those short-term recommendations that may come out of that planning effort. Not a whole lot of specifics on that. This is mostly an earmark to get that implementation going upon the completion of that plan, and the specific recommendations that come out of that plan. So I don't have a whole lot of specifics on items 1, 2, or 3, but it is it just follows with the importance of the investment in Madison Park and this effort towards getting a true master plan completed.
Thank you. Any quick questions, colleagues?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bullock.
Thanks, David. Have informally committed to the planning director the balance. So I had a proposal that we discussed last time for $20,000, up to $20,000 for storage, and really for tables, event tables for the use around the community court. This is an informal discussion, but the hope is that we could find less expensive storage on site that exists already. So maybe we get some tables and a cart to transport. And so, assuming for the moment that that works out, I'm happy to commit the balance of that $20,000, estimate to this implementation of the plan that Assistant Director Boss is talking about here tonight. So that's at least an initial down payment, I think, I hope.
No, I appreciate that collaborative approach very much. Colleagues, any other questions? Hearing none, why don't we move on to pickleball then?
All right, Mr. President, so shifting gears to Lakewood Park. So this is in response to the, what we'll call the outpouring of support for pickleball. We were looking at one location that was slated for resurfacing this year, but it was not as appropriate as looking at this location of converting the north court into 4 pickleball courts. The project cost is $150,000. I think you might be aware that our county councilman is working right now towards a community development supplemental grant which should be an amount of $50,000. And so this request, an ARPA request for $50,000 would then split that cost equally between 50 from the city, 50 from the county, and 50 from ARPA federal dollars to get this finished. And so another just worthwhile parks project here to kind of finally bring pickleball formally into Lakewood in a location that can adequately and appropriately support it.
And when you speak to the adequacy of the space, that's perhaps referring to the inadequacy of Merle Bunce Park or elsewhere being utilized
Yeah,
for
we've
that.
looked at it several other locations. It's just that, when you start talking about size, parking, and then if you're aware of the noise considerations for pickleball that have come up in several other municipalities, there's just the proximity to residential homes is something that we also took into place, and Lakewood Park minimizes the potential for the complaints that could come out of having a facility that's substantial enough that enough people can use it, but not generating significant complaints, as we've seen just in research of other communities. It's become a significant issue in some other places when it's placed directly adjacent to homes.
No, I appreciate that level of preparation and understanding of those issues applied elsewhere. And I know that both I and any future Ward 3 council persons appreciate that consideration. With that, any questions? Okay. With that, and since Mr. Boss has the microphone anyway, we'll move on to traffic calming. And this is proposed essentially through Councilman Baker and myself, both having inquired with the planning department about sort of speeding up and adding to existing traffic calming measures and processes in the city. Mr. Boss.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'll just quickly offer, so this, I guess this collaborative request that we've worked on encompasses both radar signs as well as the speed tables that we've typically installed for the streets, the nominated streets that have gotten themselves through the whole process with the requisite support of the residents on that block. To talk to the radar signs, they've been extremely popular and effective. If anybody, especially driving north on Warren, if you've been behind anybody who is speeding and then gets the strobe flash at them, they tend to slow down pretty quickly. And these are, what we've found is not only the larger signs that we're looking at in terms of more of a boundary approach to Lakewood and some of the high-speed avenues of approach that come into the city, but maintaining the smaller 12-inch signs in the neighborhood, the local neighborhood streets. They are very much appreciated by the blocks that nominate themselves, qualify, may not get to the level of resident support to have speed tables installed, but they are an appropriate educational action that then goes in. And then we gain the added benefit of that network of data collection, basically, that goes out, and it's collecting 24 hours a day. And so we can, these locations tend to generate, that's why we're looking at them, they generate complaints. And so having the network of collectors out there is extremely important with that data. And so the popularity, fortunately or unfortunately, has driven the numbers of these signs that we're looking at to a fairly higher number than we've looked in the past. And so this request is broken down into 3 tiers. The first tier for radar signs there's 11 signs. That encompasses basically what we were planning to request this year for just the neighborhood traffic calming program. And that is 6 signs in response to local neighborhood streets, and then an additional 5 signs as that part of that boundary project that I talked about with the larger 15-inch signs to kind of hit that higher speed traffic coming to the city. The second tier is another group, 2 boundary signs, and then 4 neighborhood signs that are of a lower priority that I would recommend in terms of prioritization. And then the last tier is just 2 spares. We found having spares is very valuable just as streets tend to either nominate or they become a priority just through an issue or something that's discovered and it's pop up, and it's easier for us to have that spare to throw out there. I will say the cautionary tale for radar signs is that data package that comes along with them. In order to maintain access, it's a subscription-based system. And so as part of this, it does maximize the request, the cost, but this provides for 7 years of data. So it pushes that out, although I will put forward that we don't necessarily, and it's probably not recommended to block all of these signs on a 7-year plan. What I may request, and we can continue to look at greater detail, is putting a portion of these signs on maybe a 5, 6, and 7-year plan to start to kind of stratify however many signs you want to recommend to buy, that we start putting those on in terms of a rotational basis where they're updated. I think that's, I was going to work with IT to start breaking the numbers of signs down. The subscription falls under their budgetary authority every year, but just to try to reduce that pain a little bit so that we don't get hit with a huge bill every 3 years, but we get hit with a slightly smaller bill every year that kind of just takes it into bite-size portions of that bill. So that's something that we can do with this going forward to hopefully reduce the pain of that annual subscription, is just spread out, kind of distribute the signs annually so that we're not paying for a lot, because they are popular, they are effective, and they are very valuable in terms of the data they provide. The speed tables, these are the standard 14-foot, they're about 3 inches high tables that we've installed on both Marlowe and Clarence. The feedback that we've received, they're highly effective, and they've been well received by residents. Kind of once you get over that initial hump, no pun intended, then you get them installed out there. The residents tend to like them. You can park on them, and for the most part, they kind of tend to blend in over time. They are extremely effective at slowing people down. We try to do the lowest impact installation, if that makes sense, in terms of the block, so that they're not like every 200 feet. We have a methodology to doing that, and so this represents a request for one street that is fully qualified and through the process, just awaiting those tables to be installed at the end of a water and sewer project. And then it also accounts for basically 3 more additional streets or 6 tables to be distributed among. We have 4 streets right now that are 2022 nominations that are pending a block meeting in May. And so those, based on at least 2 of those streets have already gotten above 60% resident support. Generally, when we see that, it's a pretty straightforward path that based on the block meeting and any final refinement, that we'll generally see that requisite level of support come out of the final petition. So these speed tables would go against those streets that have already kind of made their way through that process and are trending in that direction. So, and these don't have any data with them, so they are a one-time purchase that I work with Public Works to get them installed. So.
Thank you for that. I can appreciate the combination. I'm biased when I say this, of course, but the combination of ward council people just sort of responding to what is probably our most pressing request and need or challenge, and just sheer data and research of what has worked nationally or perhaps internationally to calm traffic in Lakewood. And I guess I can also acknowledge how, us adding traffic calming throughout our city changes the dynamic on other streets, which might cause a need for us to reconsider other streets and things like that. Now, Mr. Boss and Mr. Baker did the lion's share of the work here. I want to make sure, Councilman Baker, if you have any further comment, that we allow the opportunity for you to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and just want to thank the Planning Department. Assistant Director Boss has been great to work with on this, and I echo a lot of what you said about, it's a quality of life issue. We are a unique community. We didn't talk about the fact that there are no school buses for Lakewood City School students. We have a tremendous amount of seniors and folks with mobility issues, so, this is a quality of life and safety issue, so that's why I so full-heartedly support it.
Thank you. Any further questions or comment on traffic calming? Vice President Keppel.
Thank you. Assistant Director Boss, what is the difference between a speed table and a speed bump?
I think it's actually, it's the horizontal distance of the intervention on the street. So I think speed humps are kind of, if you want to call it technology, it's kind of older. It's just not, the speed tables are designed to, I guess, be a little less impactful. They allow a car generally to travel over them at a higher rate of speed, but not such a high rate of speed. It still causes that slowdown with a less jarring intervention, I guess, or yeah. So that and having the rubber tables, I think we proved that they're pretty durable. Knock on wood. The ones on Marlowe and Clarence have been through. Marlowe's been through successive winters with only one incident of damage that was repaired within a week, I think, and the ones with Clarence made it through this pretty light winter without any issue. But the rubber stood up. Speed humps and some of those things they're often constructed with asphalt, and they tend to kind of deform over time, and then you have to go back in and basically reinstall them. These things have been surprisingly durable, which has been pleasant. So good.
You know what the average through the chair, what the average lifespan is?
Of these, the rubber speed tables, I would anticipate, that's probably a question I can get back to you on it. I would anticipate probably 10, 20 years, if not longer, based on the material. I mean, they're made to be permanently put out there, so, but I don't have that specifically in front of me in terms of what their manufacturer lifespan is, so.
And then, if I could follow up with another question, in terms of the subscription, and I apologize if this is in the application, is there a breakdown of how much of each part of this is which? I know you've got all that data, but
There is some detail that is not in Granicus
okay.
that we can share quickly.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there was an attachment to the application that is not in Granicus, that is on SharePoint, that kind of breaks it down much more granularly in an Excel file.
Any other questions? I know people are seeing this for the first time, so questions may be forthcoming.
One quick question, Mr. Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the totals, the total 7-year data plan, is that the summary of all?
That's all in on the solar speed notification
Okay,
devices
that's a subtotal then.
and the data.
Okay, got it. That's a total. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Not including speed tables, which is on another.
Understood.
The data is the second last column.
Yeah, basically, each speed table is about, what I think I estimated is about $6,200. Each sign runs about $5,200. And that's for 7 years, the sign, if we were to go with the sign and then the 7-year data plan. So they're not inexpensive, but they are effective.
So just, if I can clarify, so am I interpreting this right, that each one of these is the cloud and the data plan for each one is the 2150?
Yes, that's right. That's 7 years. So
7 years of, okay, so 7
Yeah, so
years
it's
of
broken
data
down.
and cloud. per sign.
That's somewhere with $300, $325, somewhere around there per sign or per year.
What's the data company? Do we,
This is Traffic Logics.
It was important to Councilman Baker and myself that we not just install something that was unfunded in terms of how it would be, how the data would be administered and everything.
of course. Just curious, if the signs, do the signs have to work with that specific company, or there's others?
This is the company that we've used. It's part of the Sourcewell Consortium. So I mean, there's other sign manufacturers that are out there. This is just the one that we've used for the last several years.
It's not a criticism, it's just my data nerd.
Well, and while not optimal, these signs can function without a data plan if we really just wanted to have a speed notification device that didn't collect data out there. I know. Chief Story.
Mr. President, I would just add at this hour, this moment, that when I hear somebody going past December 31st, 2026, that means you cannot use American Rescue Plan Act dollars past that date. That's the final day for whom the bell tolls. That said, obviously, if a program's going on past that, at that point in time, it becomes incumbent upon whomever is sitting here and there, where does the money come from?
Sure. So perhaps it's up for debate if the money is spent, even if it is for a service that exists beyond 2026, that it may be a viable use, and given how we reconcile these dollars, that it might be a moot point anyway.
Good question. I've asked that before regarding can you prepay? Can you plan ahead? The literature I've read basically states that the money has to be tied down by December 31st, 2026. End of story. So that's not a clear answer to you, but that's what all the lawyers I've talked to have stated.
Sure. Well, that's a fair consideration for us to have. Any other questions? Hearing none, shall we move on to a rather interesting ODOT property acquisition proposal? And who would run point on this? Would that be Councilman Baker or someone from the Planning Department or Public Works?
Mr. I can jump in. Director Leininger and I have been coordinating on this, but he's not here, so I don't know how much Assistant Director Boss has been filled in. So I'll just jump in, and then if the Planning Department has anything to add, we can go from there. So this is an interesting one. As someone actually, I was envisioning this anyways, if someone shared a photo on social media of the neighborhood destruction of the southwestern edge of Lakewood when 90 was built. 130 homes were knocked down to necessitate the building of 90. It was actually interesting. It took 10 years, so for a whole decade, there were abandoned homes for some period of time, and then just abandoned fields for the next period of time before they actually got to construction. And it split a lot of neighborhoods, so Niagara Drive, Woodward, Northland, were all split in half. So, while I live on Niagara, I did not meet my neighbors on the north side of Niagara until I campaigned for public office because we are no longer part of the same neighborhood. So this project is brought forth with that in mind. Obviously, nothing short of capping or taking away the interstate would further connect these communities back to one another. But I do think it is a unique opportunity to kind of start this discussion. Interestingly enough, even though the city maintains, mows, does tree maintenance, picks up trash, actually has a park, Niagara Park, on this land, and does all of the associated intendencies of ownership. The city does not own these properties. ODOT could come in tomorrow and put gravel piles there and use it as part of material laydown for construction or maintenance of I-90 or for any other reason. They could sell it to a developer or whomever else. So it is within that spirit that this map is a little interesting. I don't have the capabilities on my home computer that the planning department has, but I did use a software that basically kind of outlined the available parcels and came up with 4.5 acres of property that is within Ward 1 and Ward 2. Right now, they are primarily mowed, kind of vacant land. I do think there's opportunities for, whether it's tree plantings, community gardens, enhanced open space and parkland, the ability to further buffer those neighborhoods from the traffic and noise of I-90. So the formula I use, and what's interesting, so it's about 4.5 acres, about 2.6 of which is south of 90, and about 1.8 of which is north of 90. Cuyahoga County recently, and this is where so you all understand kind of where I came up with the numbers for this project. Cuyahoga County recently obtained an appraisal for some of the work they're doing on the Hilliard Road reconstruction. And the appraisal had the property under the bridge, which is on the Lakewood side, evaluated at like about $23,000 or $24,000 an acre. So this is the nerdy stuff I do on a daily basis. So $23,000, $24,000 an acre times 4.5 is about $106,000. So that's how I came up with the land value cost. And in my day job, I also work with ODOT often on, they call it limited access highway areas or excess lands. There's essentially a couple ways you can acquire them from ODOT. One is they can give you a director's deed, and if you're a municipality, it's free. However, ODOT retains the right to do everything they want on it. So you have it and you own it, but ODOT can put a gravel plant there, can do whatever they want. So in order to actually own it in fee without ODOT having the ability to just use it as they wish, you have to pay some modicum of what would be considered fair market value. And although I have not coordinated with ODOT, I have coordinated with the planning department. Director Leininger has been making inroads with ODOT over the past couple of years, but obviously with a lot of other planning projects going on in Lakewood, this just hasn't risen to the level of kind of closing the deal. And I've offered to help work with the planning department to help get it done, but we need the funds. So that's what this is for. So $106,000 would be to acquire the property, roughly. Now that can obviously change a little bit, but depending on the actual acreages, I'm not a surveyor. I'm just a guy who can draw lines on maps. But then about $14,000 for title environmental survey, because you would need to get a surveyor to come in and actually do legal descriptions. The planning department has indicated they'd be willing to go before a planning commission to get the lots separated and all that. So I do think it's a great idea. I often walk my kid home, and some of the property that is near Seneca, there's about 0.7, 0.8 acres that could be put to productive public use. There's some property on Delaware near Atkins and Glenberry that is just a field. It could be used for productive use, community gardens, parkland. And I think it would activate those communities a little bit more and then provide a buffer to I-90. So happy to answer any questions. I've been pretty verbose here, but this is really important to me. Lakewood is underparked. Our active living task force back in 2015, said that we are tremendously underparked. So this is an ability to enhance that. Particularly the southwestern side of Lakewood is underparked. So this would help that.
Thank you. Any comment from the administration on the proposal just before we go on to my colleagues?
Just again, some things to consider. We have had residents in that area inquire about purchasing that ODOT property that is behind their homes. So again, I'm just, bringing up things to consider. We have had issues with that ODOT, with a few pieces of that ODOT property being dumping grounds at times. And some of the dumping that goes on there is, within 6 feet, extending 6 feet away from the residents that live there. So it's like, basically, whose trash is it? It's, they're claiming it's not theirs, that type of thing. And again, I mean, if we do obtain the property, as Councilman Baker said, we could look into planting trees there. It will add more maintenance where, if residents currently call now, we let them know that that is ODOT property. And with it being on marginal, obviously that's going to have to go to near the top of the list in priority because it's going to be in the public eye all the time. So again, just some things to consider. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Baker.
Yeah, and I Director Gordon, do we mow it and maintain it already?
That's, yes, but again, I mean, with it being, with certain things that are over there being ODOT, with residents bringing up things that need to be done with it, we're able to say, it's ODOT's property and things like that. But in regards to the maintenance part, my thing is if it becomes a city property, which obviously, working with the planning department and all that, we're all on the same page, that with it being on marginal, not that that sets a tone to be above anywhere else, I think priority-wise, it needs to be brought up. And we're gonna need, with it being, having Lakewood's name on it, the upkeep is definitely gonna need to be stepped up. So there's gonna be costs that are associated with that as well.
Understood.
Yeah,
Any further, Councilman Baker and then Councilman Rader?
Yeah, and I would say that I agree, and we've worked, particularly, I think I know the neighborhood you're talking about. And I actually, in certain instances where it wouldn't make sense for public use of the property, I think getting it in the city's hands would make an easier transactions for neighbors if they wanted to acquire, 400 square feet of land rather than go through ODOT. So I do think that, that is an important qualification. And furthermore, I would be glad to work with you, Director Gordon, to X out areas that you think would be negative from a maintenance perspective. Because I do think there are 3 or 4 pretty prominent areas that, when people call the city comes, and we can program it better to better serve our residents. So I'd be willing to work with you on that, and I think we could come up with a productive compromise.
That would be great.
Councilman Rader?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, if we're looking back maybe 5 years from now on what we're doing today, some of the things that we worked on, I think this is one of the things we can be most proud of, putting money into actually acquiring park property and expanding our park network. So I just want to say that I'm fully supportive of this. But I do have one question for Mr. Baker. Just for clarity, and I'm really glad that you're taking the charge on this and you do property acquisition at the parks for a living, so we're very fortunate to have you on this. But what's the process look like from here on out? So we get the 106,000 or 100 and whatever, 20-something thousand appropriated. Do we start some kind of negotiation process with ODOT, or how does the acquisition process work in terms of timeline? I know there's certain deadlines we have to meet with this money too to make sure that it gets used in an efficient manner and to the whole federal government's liking. So would love to hear a little more.
Yeah, so Director Leininger, have been going back and forth. Director Leininger has some active conversations that have just kind of fallen off with ODOT. I am working with ODOT in my other capacity on some properties in downtown Cleveland that are excess ODOT lands. So I've offered myself to the planning department to help facilitate those discussions. Now, once you, there is no legislative intervention required on behalf of ODOT. It is an administrative act that they can do to transfer property to municipalities and other public entities. So it's essentially a bureaucratic exercise. So at that point, you would convene, to the extent this money is appropriated. The land cost could go down depending on the acreage, right? So I think that appropriating the $120,000 would give us a pot of money to work with. And then I would advocate for, if some of that money is not spent, that it be put into improvement of that land. So it would just be more so allocated to this project. But then you basically figure out, by doing what I did, essentially sending them the map that I made, saying, hey, there may be some utilities that run under there that they need continuous access to. There may be other considerations. One of them, it's ODOT land, but a resident's driveway is on it. So is there already an agreement with that resident? So you just kind of have to go through those things. And then it's essentially putting together a purchase agreement that is pretty standard. And then a 60 to 90-day close that would allow time for the presentation of the lot splits and plats to Planning Commission and approval, and then closing.
So if I made one quick follow-up. So in your experience, like a year or so, how long do these processes take from the moment we encumber the money to estimate?
Yeah, a year is is reasonable. My boss at Metro Parks would say 6 months and then make me get it done in 4. So, but it's possible to get done in 6 months.
I know it's a new topic to us. Vice President Keppel.
Thank you. Thank you, and thanks for putting this together, Councilman Baker. I think it's certainly worth all due consideration, and we've been talking about this in a little bit in terms of with the Tree Advisory and Education Board about that land being an opportunity for increasing our tree canopy. And I think that's one of those opportunities too in terms of maintenance. How it's maintained could actually in some ways reduce maintenance and certainly work into our climate action plan rather than mowing grass that's doing nothing for the environment, having wildflowers or community gardens or other things, and certainly trees can contribute to. It's also, we talk a lot about, and Lakewood Alive's been doing a lot of work on the gateways into Lakewood on Warren and Lakewood Heights Boulevard. We know, a lot of our visitors come through the highway, so this property too would be a gateway to Lakewood and would give us an opportunity to show the public when they're entering Lakewood what that looks like. So lots of interesting thoughts here.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to close commentary on this one, acknowledging that we have about 27 minutes left until our full council meeting and 3 more items to get through, all of which I'd love to get through tonight. So let's maybe spend about 8 minutes on each of the remaining 3, if possible, with some leeway there, of course. Next item is regarding child care assistance proposed by Councilman Baker in conjunction with, or at least discussion with, our Human Services Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one should be pretty quick. So I reached out to the director, assistant director, and also spoke with Jessica on how we could enhance. So the pandemic was particularly difficult for young parents and folks facing childcare issues, and wanted to understand how we fund our childcare scholarship, what opportunities we may have to do more for those young families. We talk about affordability. Affordability doesn't just have to do with rent and housing costs. It has to do with other incidences of living and being a young parent. So working with the planning department, or working with Human Services Department, they came up with, they thought $10,000 would kind of be a nice buffer for them, because the way it's funded through CBDG funds, which is allocated every year by council, they can hit the end of the year and they might be running out of money, so then those families have to kind of go on a reduced amount that they get back from the city. So for a young family that is struggling to pay their bills, finding out in December that, oh, you're actually only going to get, 20% when you're getting 50% before, can be pretty tough. So if there's a way that we can take at least some money and buttress that, to provide a little bit more stability for the young families in our community, then I wanted to help. So the $10,000 actually came from the Human Services Department as a suggested number, and I fully support it, so I'm bringing it forward to all of my colleagues.
Thank you, Assistant Director Jaisley.
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 It's a hard
Jaisley.
one.
My apologies.
That's all good.
Further comment?
Yeah, just, we crunched some more numbers this afternoon just to double check our work and everything on this. And as it stands now, because last week, actually, probably right after Jessica gave you the final detail, we have now 17 families on the scholarship, and with 2 more just approved last week. And so there will be, if we continue at the 50%, we will fall short with based on the salary CDBG funds, as well as what's available through the carryover. So it would help ensure that and cover if more families come to us this summer in the next 9 months. So, and I have math and updated statistics if need be.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Vice President Keppel.
Thank you. Do you have the numbers of how short would be with the 10,000 covered, or? would
Right
you need more?
now, with the projections, now, obviously, we can't, centers, the rates could go up as well, and childcare in the summer can be a little iffy. There, either more people sometimes go on it or less, so, but today the math was like 3,875. And so typically in the last few years, we've always had some carryover. Like this year, we carried over 36,000, but that would mean we'd have no carryover. So we'd be going to the CDBG, obviously requesting more without this. So.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? All right. Well, hearing none, we will move on to the expansion of public Wi-Fi as proposed by Vice President Keppel. I assume with plenty of discussion from our IT department, or with our IT department.
Great. So this is relatively straightforward. So we have currently free public Wi-Fi at our 5 largest parks, and Director Coletta, please stop me if I get anything wrong. And we have been working to upgrade, in the last couple budget cycles, I've been proposing this, and we've worked to upgrade the equipment that is at those 5 public parks. This money would expand to all of our public parks, which, to Councilman Baker's point about us being underparked, when I was working on the map, and I don't know if, Maureen, if you're able to pull up the map link. It's in the spreadsheet too, you can link to it, but if you go to the other tab, map of, yep, there you go. In the first A2, if you click on A2, there you go. So I made up a map of where all of our public parks are in Lakewood, and you can see some of the holes. Yeah, the big hole there. So to that point about the holes in our public parks, but this would also, if we were to have, expand our public Wi-Fi to all these parks, we saw during the pandemic how important that service was to families, to students, to people working from home, and that work from home workforce is continuing to grow. So this also, it's an equity issue. So actually at the conference I was just at, I went to a lot of things about digital equity, and there's several federal programs, but for instance, the Affordable Connectivity Program only applies within a certain level of poverty bracket, and we have a lot of families who may be struggling who don't fall into that, receiving that assistance. So this would get them close to freely available Wi-Fi in most areas, except for where you see that big hole. So that is the general idea. I don't know if Director Coletta, if you want to add anything or just be available for questions.
Good evening. I have worked with my staff on reaching out to our fiber provider just to get some pricing for Vice President Keppel, and we're just still in the early phases. My staff just went out last week, took photos of all of the locations, grabbed poll numbers where there were polls nearby. So it may be a few more weeks till we have some pricing. I did notice some challenges, like for example, Clifton Prado Park, there's no poles to mount anything. So we may have to inquire. I'm not sure how to add a pole, and get electricity to it. The other thing is we may have to, this may be spreading the internet too much. So right now the internet that we're using for the 5 parks is the same internet that we're using for Wi-Fi in the buildings. So if we spread it to all of these parks, we're probably going to have to incur the additional expense of upgrading that service. So to put it in perspective, it's a $400 a month internet right now. So to add that to all of these parks, we might be looking at, doubling that. And the only other, big question mark is what is Everstream going to want for ongoing maintenance? So hopefully, we'll have some answers soon. I will say that some of the locations that you have identified they were also on the police department's list, specifically Niagara and Edwards. And they did want to add a camera right across the street from Celeste. So, police did get a grant last year to add cameras, but they did not have the funding for the fiber portion. So I don't know if, this would help with the police camera project in that regard for those specific locations, but that would be greatly appreciated. But yeah, there's just more to come. We're working as fast as we can on getting that information. And we are behind on the current Wi-Fi at the 5 parks is literally starting to fall apart. So I do want to make that a priority that we replace that equipment first to not be the laughingstock of the city. Those are my thoughts.
Mr. Chair?
Just quickly, Councilman Bullock, and then we can turn it to you. It sounds like there's a lot of unknowns that go along with this as it stands currently, and that's okay. I guess my question to Vice President Keppel particularly is if some prioritization of which parks, if necessary to cut, is contemplated or may perhaps already done, just for the sake of most bang for our buck, so to speak.
Yes, actually, if Clerk Bach, if you want to go to that spreadsheet, and I don't know, we can also have this more detailed conversation in the upcoming weeks when we have a little bit more of the data, but I kind of tried to prioritize, and this is just me thinking more in terms of also the public transportation and where people might be gathering, but in the proposal, I also did address with the police cameras as well as, because we've had that issue come up before of trying to get fiber, and I know some of the properties that Director Coletta mentioned are also in the police camera, which, to get the signal and to run those cameras. So, yeah, certainly prioritization can be done around that, as well as reaching, again, for me, would be looking at that map too about where we don't have, so that more folks in Lakewood can get to a public park with Wi-Fi. So I think there is more to be worked out, and we can come back to that on the 24th, but wanted to get this in to be thinking about it.
Understood. Thank you. Councilman Bullock?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Council Vice President and the administration and Director Coletta, or Manager Coletta? Director Coletta. We'll call you Chief Coletta. So this is a very thoughtful and timely proposal, I think. A couple observations. I wasn't involved in proposing this, but it's good to see this list. So it's Wager, Cove, Madison, Kaufman, Lakewood Park currently. A couple thoughts in no particular order. Wager Park gets heavily used. I can say that that's my neighborhood. And if we go back to that map, I don't know if Haneen or Maureen have got that map, you could see Wager, if you drew a concentric circle around that would serve a lot of neighborhoods, north and south of Madison. In fact, I just saw, some friends I hadn't seen for a while at Wager Park at the little kiddie swing sets because they had a little kid and I was chasing mine. So it works, and I'm very, very glad that the administration, this and the previous administration, designed and implemented that project. It's really working. I will say to the chief, I've tried to do a jogging loop around that park on a Wi-Fi video, and I would get it half the time, and then I'd drop out half the time, get it half the time, and drop out half the time. So the existing service there doesn't reach the whole park, in fact, doesn't reach the playground. To fill this void here, maybe Roosevelt Elementary would be a logical spot, because that's right in the middle of, John, where is it, south of Madison? South of Athens, right. So that's a really strategic spot. Of course, we don't control a school board property, but that perhaps is a natural public location that we could work out some kind of a joint agreement with and could serve those neighborhoods. I will also just say, you know, count me as a strong supporter of the whole shebang. I mean, I think two thoughts. One is the way people use parks today includes their mobile phone and includes saying, hey, family member, spouse, kid, if you've got an older kid, where are you? Can I ping you? Do I know where you are? It also includes a selfie. You know, I am here and having this great experience at a Lakewood community neighborhood spot, a park. It's been upgraded. I'm meeting all these fun business people and friends. And that's free, organic, social marketing for our community. So, man, if we want to just really underscore all the great things that are already naturally present in our community, just equip the residents to do that very thing. You know, plenty of people have unlimited data, but some don't, and maybe they don't want to have to, you know, foot the bill. So if we can facilitate visitors, friends, et cetera, to just tell the great story that's palpable all over Lakewood, that's one easy way we can do it, even though it's not cost-free. So maybe an approach would be that a tranche of funds from the ARPA allocation now would go towards, you know, whatever the first logical steps are, and then we get the rest of it done in the full budget during our regular budget process later this year. That's perhaps one way to go about it, but I certainly support it and welcome the proposal.
Thank you. Any further comments from my colleagues? Hearing none, thank you. And let's move on to our final item for this evening, expanded concessions at Lakewood Park. Councilman Bullock, you proposed.
Yep,
and,
thanks, Mr. President, or Mr. Chair. I think this is short. This is kind of a placeholder proposal that follows on a recent committee hearing we had. And there's some email communication with Director Gordon that I had. So we consider this a placeholder. We had a deadline for council submissions. I didn't want to miss it. There's some more conversation that needs to happen between the administration and the Help Foundation. But so there was some experience in the past that said, yeah, maybe this isn't working successfully, but proposals more recently are that we think it could work, given the fact that we have increasing utilization of the park, where we have additional events beyond the concerts at the band shell and the movie nights at the band shell, such as the Solstice event. Certainly July 4 is very busy, and just any given warm weather, beautiful day at Lakewood Park attracts a lot of people. So the possibility here would be that a roving food cart, whether for formal events or just for any given day where there's a lot of people on the paved pathway or at various locations around the park, it could well be a feature of expand service for our concessions. Product is an overusing kind of corporate term, but it's a good way to describe it. What's the service and the product and the presentation that we're providing to Lakewood Park in the pool, in the playground, in a future splash pad accessory, which you can get to without entering the pool? You know, we're doing really wonderful things at the park, and so a discussion in it was Councilman Rader's committee where we just had this Public Works and Sustainability. The concept was, you know, could Lakewood take some incremental steps in the next year or two, as we expect really expanded attendance around the pool and everything else we're doing there. And maybe in 5 years' time, we would do something like what is done at Huntington Beach, where there's a real upgrade in the windows and the signage and the food service and the kiosk. That would take more planning, but you could see how kind of reimagining what we do today and growing in over time, over let's say 3 to 5 years, you would have potentially, you know, a mobile food cart as part of that service. So just a placeholder for now. Maybe we could have some more informal discussions and not a big ticket item, although there's some operational considerations to the factor. And we may have an old food cart, I don't know, but Director Gordon, I don't want to step on your toes, but at the same time you and I were communicating informally, I was also hearing, you know, optimism about potentially expanding in this manner.
Thank you. Yes, was there any comment from the administration to start us off? Chief Story.
My question, Councilman Bullock, is, are you talking about like a, not trying to be, like a Steve's hot dog cart kind of thing, like you see in Public Square? Or are you thinking something like large? I just was curious what your thoughts
Not a
were.
food truck, but yeah, like a push cart. But all that needs to be detailed better, right? So there needs to be a conversation with the administration and the potential vendor. I think what they would envision would be something that can sell cold drinks and maybe some other cold stuff and dry stuff. So I don't think we're talking about a powered vehicle, but rather that's exactly what needs some more, something modest, but that would enable, and quite frankly, it's a vocational mission for our vendor help. And so they were giving us some positive feedback recently to say, you know, some front of shop skills training could work well and could be a constructive and good thing for our clients to learn and get practice and experience in. There's also back of shop tasks that get done too, but and maybe some of that rotates. That's a staffing conversation for that agency. But the idea would be, you know, sure, it could work on some days, have the optionality to take some cold drinks and some whatever else we're selling on a stroll around the park, and potentially when there are planned events that we have multiple times throughout the year. That's as far as we've gotten.
I want to turn it to Director Gordon, but just quickly also want to point out that when Cornucopia first started as a concessionaire at Lakewood Park, they had a cart, and they found it to be impractical or for whatever reason and stopped using it. Why that is, I don't know. It would be an important
Yeah,
point for us
I've
to know.
covered
That's
some of
exactly
that.
what you're describing.
Right, I've covered some of that with the current manager in a conversation as recent as last week, who thought that they would want to take a fresh look at doing it more successfully compared to whatever the experience was years ago. So I'm aware that that is also a factor. So I don't know how this shakes out, but anyway, this is a
Maybe just been
placeholder.
as simple as a staffing issue. We don't know. That said, you know, there was a cart before, and it's worth noting, Cornucopia was absorbed by Help Foundation, which absorbed this lease agreement or arrangement as a result of that. Director Gordon, anything to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you for stealing my thunder on Cornucopia. That's what I was just going to bring up, and again, I feel like the bearer of bad news tonight, but I just want to, again, bring up a few points. As you said, when Cornucopia was operating a concession stand, in talks with them, it was determined the food cart was non-profitable, and it created kind of a lack of utilization, and then the cart ended up being a deterrent inside the concession stand, so a lot of the time they had to put it outside because they needed more employees there, and things like that. And also, research on our end showed that, you know, for movies and concerts at the park, most if not all the residents bring their own food and drinks. Not that we are certainly encouraging it based on, you know, Councilman Bullock's proposition. The one other point I wanted to bring up that I actually thought of today was that we're in a cashless society today. So with this card, I think we need to keep in mind also that, there's a percentage of when you use your debit or credit card, and if this idea were to be entertained, is the Help Foundation going to be okay with understanding all of that? That somebody would have to carry around a credit card machine. Not everybody carries cash. Just again, some points I wanted to bring up. And again, thank you.
Thank you. Some challenges that may, with a new set of eyes.
And one other thing, I'm
different
sorry.
results, but go ahead.
And also, we have an ordinance, so they would have to be in compliant with the codified ordinance in regards to mobile food service operation. So that would also have to be discussed as well, just so we're all on the same page.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues, acknowledging we have only a few minutes left in our meeting? Anything else from the administration? Okay. Wow. All right. Well, we'll reconvene for our full council meeting in about 5 minutes total. Stay close. Thank you.